Hello? In 1910, there were two famous billionaire sisters from a noble lineage named Dorothea Williamson and Claire Williamson. They inherited a large fortune from their family and embarked on a journey around the world. Both sisters were born and raised in England, were in their 30s, and had no financial pressures, so they had plenty of free time to enjoy the life they had always dreamed of. In the second year of their trip, while staying at the Queen Hotel in Canada, they accidentally saw an advertisement for a nursing home in the newspaper. The article was written by a doctor introducing a natural treatment method that was very scientific and effective, capable of addressing many issues that modern medicine couldn't solve. This piqued the sisters' curiosity. Although they didn't have any serious health issues, they often had sore throats when they caught a cold. In a picturesque town, natural therapies were being used to eliminate chronic illnesses. This was certainly intriguing news for the wealthy women who desired better health. With the mindset of wanting to try, the sisters bought many books by that doctor and eventually decided to go to a very unfamiliar town in Washington to meet her. Later, people would learn that this was actually a journey to hell. The place they were headed to was called Wilderness Heights, the Wild Villa. To get to the villa, they had to take a ferry from Seattle across the beautiful Puget Sound and then pass through a small village named Olalla. In the spring of 1911, following the map's directions, the sisters arrived in Olalla. After a long search, they finally reached this remote town. The nursing home at the Wild Villa was located at the highest point in the town. The owner of the villa was Linda Hazzard, a tall, quiet, middle-aged woman with a gentle smile, just as described in the correspondence. She skillfully introduced the surrounding facilities and systematically analyzed the sisters' conditions, encouraging them to start treatment at the villa as soon as possible. In her self-published book in 1908 titled Fasting for the Cure of Disease, she claimed that food was the root of all health problems. Specifically, she wrote that the appetite was a craving, hunger was a kind of desire, and desires were never satisfied. The treatment plan proposed by Dr. Linda was an alternative therapy called scientific fasting. She was one of the few experts on the American continent recognized for specializing in fasting therapy. She believed that the underlying cause of all diseases was the consumption of too much food, leading to the production of toxins in the body and various illnesses. To truly recover the body, the digestive system needed a complete rest. During the fasting period, she would use some special methods to completely eliminate impurities from the body. Linda had published several books on this theory and repeatedly confirmed the safety and scientific nature of fasting therapy, claiming to have created a unique new method based on many years of clinical research that could cure all diseases. Claire and Dorothea were not the only patients at the villa. Before they arrived, Linda had treated dozens of people. Linda spoke very elegantly, and her words had a special persuasive power, which made the two sisters, who were vegetarians, very satisfied and without hesitation. Both quickly paid the monthly fee of $60 and officially began their fasting regimen. However, the sisters Dorothea and Claire Williamson quickly realized that life at the nursing home was not what they had imagined. They were not allowed to stroll through the small town or drink fresh fruit juices daily as expected. Instead, they were forced to follow a strict and harsh treatment regimen. Regarding their diet, the sisters were closely monitored and only allowed to drink half a cup of tomato or aloe juice each day to ensure their digestive system was completely rested. Around 3 p.m. every day, they had to soak in a bathtub to receive laxative treatments and enemas, followed by immersing themselves in over 10 liters of clean water to remove accumulated toxins from their bodies through excretion. The most important part of the entire treatment process was the special massage therapy performed by Dr. Linda Hazzard herself. After the enemas, Linda would use her fists and palms to press on the patients' heads and backs, while frantically shouting the word "eliminate." This was accompanied by violent actions like slapping their bodies with great force, similar to how a man would do it. This seemed to be understood as a method of curing diseases through some form of willpower transmission to the patients. In the spring of 1911, there were no other patients at the villa. Linda secretly stayed by their side 5 days a week, constantly warning that the various reactions they experienced during fasting were due to their conditions reaching an extremely severe stage. She emphasized that they needed to persevere to completely detoxify in order to address the root problem. Under such constant brainwashing, despite experiencing many adverse symptoms like dizziness and lightheadedness, the sisters still tried to adhere to the treatment method. Even when the violent massages left them bruised or in pain to the point of crying and screaming, Dorothea and Claire did not want to give up halfway. They continued to follow Linda's advice and persisted with the treatment process. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were crucial periods for the development of antibiotics and surgery, but many alternative treatments also achieved significant results. The case of the Wild Villa was one of the strangest. To alleviate the pain caused by hunger, and excessive excretion, the sisters encouraged each other by reading some excerpts from theological books as prescribed by the doctor. Initially, they felt their bodies seemed to improve, but even a non-medical expert could easily see that the situation would soon become much worse. By April 1911, after 4 weeks of fasting, they began to feel that everything was becoming strange. Claire noticed that her sister Dorothea mostly slept, and both of them became increasingly weak, frequently fainting and unable to hold even the lightest objects. The enema process, which initially took only half an hour to complete, now lasted over 3 hours because they no longer had the strength to perform the prescribed movements. To keep the sisters undergoing treatment without exerting themselves, Linda even made 2 simple hammocks beside the bathtub for them to lie in during treatment. At first, the sisters often asked the doctor if their conditions were improving, but over time they quickly lost the strength to speak. Dorothea and Claire could no longer stand like normal people and could only crawl around the room. They were so emaciated that their spines were visible under their skin, but the most frightening thing was that even the doctor they trusted had gradually changed completely. Once Claire saw her sister Dorothea murmuring to Dr. Linda, asking if the symptoms she was experiencing were due to the fasting treatment. In response, Dr. Linda, who was usually polite and gentle, suddenly grabbed Dorothea's head with both hands shaking and hitting it, while growling in a completely different voice, "The real problem is in your brain." By the 8th week after witnessing this horrifying scene, Claire finally changed her mind, because she thought that this surely could not be a normal doctor. One night, when no one was around, she quietly told Dorothea that she would go out to seek help. She then tried to support her weak body and left the room. At that point, Dorothea no longer had the strength to move. In May 1911 in Sydney, Australia, a nanny of the Williamson family named Margaret Conway received a letter from Claire. She had been the nanny of the sisters since they were young because their biological mother had died early, so she had cared for them until they grew up. After receiving Claire's letter, she felt extremely uneasy because what Claire wrote seemed very strange, different from her usual elegant writing style. Not only were the descriptions in the letter illogical, but even the most basic words were written in a convoluted and overlapping manner. What scared her the most was that Claire mentioned many stories about the sisters recovering their health in a small town. Besides constantly praising a doctor named Linda Hazzard, Claire also repeatedly mentioned that Dorothea's brain was having problems. Nanny Margaret did not know what had happened to the sisters and felt extremely worried. Out of extreme concern, Margaret immediately bought a boat ticket to the described location. Upon arriving at the villa, she continuously searched for the sisters and finally found Dorothea. The once beautiful young woman now weighed less than 30 kilograms. Her consciousness was diminished and her reactions were very slow. She was no longer the same, and her sister Claire had already passed away, her body gutted and mummified. According to Dr. Linda, the cause of Claire's death was cirrhosis, a consequence of mistakenly taking medication as a child. Meanwhile, Dorothea had brain issues as described in Claire's letter. Dr. Linda was a person with excellent medical skills, a patient and gentle voice, and also very persuasive. However, from the moment she saw the woman in front of her, Margaret always had a feeling that was both familiar and disgusting. She suppressed her inner anger, demanded to take Claire's body and the weak Dorothea away, and planned to contact the sisters' relatives for discussion. However, as if anticipating all this, Linda quickly took out 2 letters and handed them to Margaret. Upon opening them, she was shocked because they were 2 letters signed by the sisters, authorizing Dr. Linda Hazzard as their guardian and the sole heir to all their assets, and donating their bodies to the villa after their deaths. At that moment, Margaret finally realized why she always felt familiar. It was because the clothes and jewelry Linda wore were all things Claire used when she was alive. Since Linda had been at the nursing home in the town, no one knew exactly how many people had died from the fasting therapy there. Only after the Williamson sisters' case was exposed did this terrible villa finally come to everyone's attention. Linda Hazzard was born in 1867. Her real name was Linda Laura Burfield, and she was born in Carver, Minnesota. Her early life was unremarkable. In 1903, she met Samuel Chrisman Hazzard, a soldier expelled from his unit for embezzling military funds. Samuel was a scoundrel, an addict, but Linda fell deeply in love with him and agreed to marry. In 1906, Samuel brought Linda to Washington to start a new life. They bought a house in Olalla and opened an office in Seattle. Linda had never studied modern medicine. Her medical license and business permit were obtained through her grandfather's connections, and she proclaimed herself a diet master. Over more than 10 years, she treated dozens of patients using various methods to persuade them to undergo her scientific fasting treatment. According to the medical records of the villa, the causes of death of the patients were diverse, including tuberculosis, heart disease, and kidney disease, and no one was recorded as dying of starvation. What's more peculiar is that subsequent investigations revealed she tightly controlled the correspondence of her patients. After manipulating their minds, she would make them reveal all their assets and explicitly state in their wills that all their property and remains would be voluntarily transferred to Wilderness Heights for disposal. Before arriving, they were very wealthy individuals, but after their deaths, only a few dozen dollars remained in their names. In fact, the entire Wilderness Heights estate was actually the property of one deceased patient. Linda was not the first to believe in the theory of fasting for disease treatment. She was influenced by Dr. Edward Hooker, Dewey, an American born in 1837, and who died in 1904, and the author of The No Breakfast Plan and the Fasting Cure. Dewey believed that all human diseases were due to overeating, thus reducing food intake, and fasting would solve all health problems. When his book was published, the British Medical Journal vehemently criticized it as the most short-sighted thinking ever. Nonetheless, many people were still persuaded by this theory. Like Dewey, Linda believed that eating was the root cause of all diseases. While Dewey merely encouraged eating less, Linda planned to completely eliminate food from the diet. On August 11, 1911, Linda was arrested for the murder of Claire Williamson, but she never admitted to her crimes. By the end of 1912, after the issues at the villa were thoroughly resolved, Linda's case was formally brought to trial at the district court. Because the regulation of medical facilities was still in its infancy at that time, there was no legal basis for identifying medical negligence. Additionally, all of the victim's organs had been removed and cremated by her, so no incriminating evidence could be found. Ultimately, she was only sentenced to 25 years in prison, causing regret and outrage among countless people. The case concluded with charges of fraud and manslaughter. Before Linda was arrested, Dorothea's uncle John Herbert in Oregon paid $1,000 to ransom her from the villa. According to Dorothea's recollections, Claire had been discovered by Linda shortly after she went out for help. From that day on, the sisters were completely isolated and never saw each other again. Like all the patients who had disappeared there, Claire's body was cremated and disposed of, and she would never return to her homeland. In 1908, 2 patients treated there also died, a wealthy Norwegian immigrant mother and her son. The mother, Daisy Maud Hagland, 38 years old, and her son, Ivar, 3 years old, perished after 50 days of fasting. After the deaths of Daisy and Ivar, patients continued to die at the villa, and Linda always shirked responsibility, blaming the illnesses they had before arriving at her nursing home. She even performed autopsies herself and collected treatment results. In 1910, a young civil engineer named Earl Edward Erdman, 24-year-old suffering from indigestion, sought Linda's help. He carefully recorded a diary of his treatment process for nearly 2 months starting on February 1, 1910. According to his records, his breakfast consisted of a few spoonfuls of orange juice or fasting. Lunch was fasting or a little vegetable broth, and dinner was fasting or a bit of soup or vegetable juice. Finally, on March the 28th, he died of starvation. After Erdman, Linda admitted Lewis E. Rader, a former Washington legislator. He suffered from stomach pain, and after 37 days of treatment, he also died, emaciated, weighing less than 45 kilograms. In 1935, the villa was engulfed by a fire, but the apartment where the Williamson sisters and other patients lived, the enema bathtub, and the wooden boards used for dissections remained intact. Many reported hearing faint whispers in the rooms. According to witnesses, these sounds seemed to be pleas for help. "Take me out." The exact number of people buried under this land remains unknown to this day. They all died in despair and starvation under Linda's pseudoscientific care. In 1915, after 2 years in prison, Linda was granted an early pardon by Governor Ernest Lister for good behavior on the condition that she leave the USA permanently. On December 25, 1915, Linda was released and pardoned. After her release, she moved to New Zealand and continued practicing, but was quickly arrested again in 1920 and received only an administrative fine. Despite her repeated incarcerations, Linda persistently sought to return to the villa she had long desired. Although her reputation was tarnished by the deaths of many patients, under her care, a portion of the population in Washington still trusted her. Linda re-established her medical facility, renaming it the Center for Health Mastery. There, she continued to operate, accepting patients and employing her treatment methods, including enforced fasting combined with other warranted forms of care. Consequently, many patients continued to die under unclear circumstances. By 1938, after the Williamson sisters arrived at Linda's center, she herself contracted pneumonia. She decided to apply her fasting therapy to herself. As a result, on June 24th of the same year, Linda died, at the 70-year-old due to excessive starvation after 3 days of self-treatment. Linda truly believed in her method to the extent that her own life ended because of it. Linda's death was a high price to pay, and also a punishment for the tragedies she inflicted on so many innocent people. Though this story contains many horrifying and heartbreaking truths, it also serves as a warning that we must be cautious of quacks and treatment methods that lack scientific basis and clear certification. All over the streets and alleys of Japan, you can always come across various large and small shrines. The people usually believe that there are deities that exist, and the shrines are where the deities reside. When a person passes away, the soul will depart from the body, and death is not the end, but a transition to another world. Today's story is called The Revenge of the Ghost. A female university student went missing on her way back to the dormitory after a late-night part-time job, and a few days later her body was found in a wilderness area. After 7 years of investigation with no progress, the police finally found the murderer. However, the result has sparked many strange rumors. The story took place in 2009 in the city of Hamada, Japan. This city is located in the western part of Shimane Prefecture, bordering the cities of Masuda and Oda. The main character of the story is Miyako Hiraoka, a 19-year-old first-year university student who loves English and dreams of traveling the world one day. To avoid becoming a financial burden on her family, she found a part-time job at an ice cream shop through an agency. Every day after school, Hiraoka would work at the ice cream shop until 9 p.m. and then walk back to the student dormitory, as the distance between the two was only about 2 kilometers. Although it was not far, the road in between was a small, poorly lit street with few houses around, making it very deserted, especially at night. Walking alone at night required a certain level of courage, which was a significant challenge for a young female student like Hiraoka. Initially, Hiraoka had a co-worker who also lived in the same dorm, so after work the two would often walk back to the dorm together without any issues. However, recently Hiraoka's co-worker suddenly quit their job for an unknown reason, forcing Hiraoka to walk back to the dorm alone at night on the dark, deserted road. Like most other girls, Hiraoka was always afraid of walking alone at night, especially on such a dark, unlit road. She felt anxious and unsafe and had considered quitting her job, but little did she know that a horrific tragedy was about to befall her just as she was preparing to quit. So what exactly happened on that day? What misfortunes did Hiraoka face? Let's go back to October 26, 2009 to find out. October 26, 2009 was a Monday, and as usual after her shift, Hiraoka went to the ice cream shop to start her work. At 9 p.m. after her shift ended, since her co-worker had suddenly quit, Hiraoka had to walk back to the dorm alone. Besides having to walk 2 kilometers through that dark, scary road, she had another option: to take the bus from the ice cream shop to the city station and then transfer to another bus to get back to the dorm. However, taking the bus would have incurred additional travel expenses. At the time, Hiraoka thought about it for a bit, as she was about to go abroad as an international student and her finances were a bit tight. She thought it would be good to save a little, so she decided to walk back to the dorm alone on the deserted road. After her shift, Hiraoka picked up a trash bag from the shop and left, but no one could have imagined that she would never return. The next day, on October 27th, 2009, Hiraoka's parents received a call from the ice cream shop where she worked. Her co-worker said he wanted to ask the parents if they had any way to contact Hiraoka, as she had not shown up for work that day and he had tried calling her multiple times without success. Hiraoka's parents were uneasy because they had also called their daughter that morning, but there was no response. They thought her phone might be malfunctioning, so they didn't worry too much. When they received a call from their daughter's colleague, Hiraoka's parents quickly called the school to check if their daughter was there, but everyone said she had not returned to the dormitory since last night. Hiraoka's parents became increasingly concerned that something was wrong. They had an unsettling feeling that their daughter had met with misfortune, so they immediately reported it to the police. More than a week had passed since Hiraoka was reported missing, and the police investigation was still ongoing, but no clues about the girl had been found yet. On the morning of November 6, 2009, a man walking in the Garyu Mountain area on the border between Hiroshima and Shimane prefectures suddenly discovered a round object in a pile of fallen leaves. As the man approached and examined it closely, he discovered that it was the head of a young woman. Alarmed, the man hastily reported it to the police. When the police arrived at the scene, they found signs of strangulation on the victim and numerous bruises on her face, indicating that she had been beaten before her death. Based on the short haircut, the victim was strongly suspected to be Hiraoka, who had gone missing more than a week earlier. The police then conducted a DNA test of the victim and confirmed that the results matched Hiraoka's parents. Hiraoka's parents were devastated by this horrific news, and the discovery of the decapitated head also caused great distress and fear among the local residents. The police are making continuous efforts to solve the case as quickly as possible in order to restore a sense of security for the community. Since the incident occurred in the Garyu mountain area straddling Hiroshima and Shimane prefectures, police forces from both prefectures have been mobilized, and a special investigation team has been established. A large number of police officers have been deployed to the Garyu mountain area to search in the hope of finding the rest of the victim's body. Afterwards, the police found a left femur bone that had been stripped of flesh near the entrance of the forest, and the victim's torso and limbs were also found in the eastern area of the forest. In addition, the police discovered some animal feces mixed with human fingernails about 300 meters from the top of the mountain. DNA testing confirmed that these samples belonged to the victim Hiraoka. Based on the evidence collected, the police estimated that Hiraoka was murdered sometime between October 26th and 31. They believe the initial crime scene was not where the head was found. The police conducted a search of the abandoned houses in the Mount Garyu area, hoping to find the main crime scene, but they did not obtain any results. Based on the injury to the victim's neck, the police believe that Hiraoka may have been strangled to death and dismembered before the perpetrator took the body up the mountain and disposed of it. However, they have not ruled out other possibilities. The police are making efforts to deploy more investigative forces in order to quickly apprehend the murderer and allay the public's concerns. During the examination, the police also found some vinyl plastic fragments on Hiraoka's body. After checking and analyzing, they learned that this was packaging material for phone directories. The police traced the origin of this material, which was manufactured in 1995 and distributed in the cities of Miyoshi, Rikuzen Takata, Higashiroshima, Kure, and Mihara. The disappearance of Hiraoka occurred in a rather remote location deep in the mountains. The police quickly approached the scene, but the traces were very scattered, as if the incident had occurred in multiple locations. A man living nearby provided some important information to the police, saying that he usually saw a car speeding through the area around 9 p.m., but he had not seen that car since the incident occurred. The police carefully reviewed the security cameras around the area but found no clues related to Hiraoka after she disappeared. At the end of October, they conducted investigations from various angles, including interviewing Hiraoka's friends and students. They found that Hiraoka was a cheerful, modest, and kind girl who was very studious and did not have many social relationships. Hiraoka also did not have a boyfriend, so the police ruled out the possibility of a conflict over a romantic relationship. Along the route from the dormitory to the place where Hiraoka went missing, the police found a black athletic shoe, but could not determine if it belonged to Hiraoka. At the scene, a witness said he had seen a girl get into a silver Toyota car that night, but it was too dark for him to see the license plate clearly. After checking the cameras, they found that Hiraoka had left her part-time job at the ice cream shop at 9:16 p.m. wearing a black and white striped shirt and carrying a black garbage bag, which was the last footage of her on camera. The distance from the shopping center to the dormitory where Hiraoka usually walked is about 2 kilometers. Along this road, there is a secluded area with no lighting, which becomes particularly frightening after 9 p.m. when there are fewer people passing by. According to the witness's account at the corresponding time, Hiraoka got into a car instead of walking back to the dormitory as usual. This has made the case more complicated, as it could be a random crime. The police have invited criminal psychologists to study the psychology of the perpetrator, and they believe that when the perpetrator saw Hiraoka walking alone on the deserted road, he may have had malicious intentions towards her. Based on the clues, they suspect the perpetrator is a man aged around 20, 40, and single. However, due to a lack of new leads, the case has reached a deadlock. The media is reporting that the perpetrator may still be hiding in Shimane Prefecture, which has caused great concern and fear among the residents. After the incident, the police have asked university students in the prefecture not to go out alone at night, and it is best not to walk back to the dormitory alone. The curfew time for the dormitories has also been changed from 12 a.m. to 10 p.m. The local government has also asked the relevant agencies to increase the installation of streetlights and surveillance equipment, as well as to increase security patrols at night to ensure the safety of the citizens. However, contrary to the efforts of the government, a supernatural event occurred on a deserted road. Many people reported hearing a strange sound that seemed to be the voice of a woman, but the sound was too faint to make out the content. The incident quickly attracted media attention and became a nationally famous case. Although the police have made efforts to investigate, the murderer seems to have disappeared from the world, so this case remains unsolved and the story is not yet over. 7 years after the incident in 2016, the Japanese police mobilized more than 310,000 police officers and set up special rewards to search for useful clues related to the case, with rewards of up to 3 million yen per day. After the case attracted widespread attention in the community, the Japanese police have tried their best to investigate and distribute countless leaflets in the hope of finding the perpetrator. Finally, the case had a breakthrough when the police classified all the files on sex crimes. They found a man named Yoshiharu Yano, who grew up in the city of Shimonoseki, Yamaguchi Prefecture. His father owned a rice shop and his mother was a laundress, and the Yano family had 2 brothers, with Yano being the eldest. Due to his excellent academic performance, he was always a source of pride for his parents. For some unknown reason in 2004, he suddenly dropped out of university and returned to his hometown. He had previously been sentenced to 3 years and 6 months in prison for following a woman and threatening her with a knife in the Tokyo area. It wasn't until May 2009 that he was released from prison, and after his release, he returned to his hometown to work for a solar energy company. With his outstanding performance, the company entrusted him to be in charge near the Shimane Prefectural University. At the time of the incident, he was living in the city of Masuda. An investigation revealed that on November 6, 2009, the day Hiraoka's body was found, Yano, who had never taken a sick day before, requested 2 days off from his company. On November 8th, to take his mother to visit his father's grave, his car suddenly caught fire on the road for an unknown reason. When they arrived at the scene, the police found 2 charred bodies and there were no signs of the sudden breaking at the scene. Witnesses said the car kept colliding with the barrier before smoke came from the hood and then suddenly burst into flames. These strange car accidents usually attracted a lot of attention, but at the time, the local media were all reporting on the Hiraoka case, so no one noticed it. 7 years later, the police were extremely surprised to discover Yuno's burned-out car near the location where Hiraoka's body was found on October 26, 2009. The car caught fire between night and early morning on October 26th, which brought an important turning point to the Hiraoka case. The police then went to Yuno's house in Masuda City to investigate, where they found a camera and a USB drive left by Yuno for his younger brother. When the data was recovered, the police found 57 photos, including images showing Hiraoka tied up in Yuno's bathroom with scratch marks on her neck. After removing the duplicate photos, the police had about 40 photos as key evidence for this case. However, due to the horrific nature of these photos, the police have not yet made them public. The Hiraoka case was finally brought to light on December 20th, 2016. The police announced that the 7-year-old case had been solved and that they had sufficient evidence to prove that the perpetrator was Yoshiharu Yano, who had died in a car accident 7 years earlier. However, since Yano had already passed away, the prosecutor's office decided not to prosecute the Miyako Hiraoka case anymore. The strange thing is that after Yuno died in a car accident, some people believe it was a simple accident, while others think Yuno may have committed suicide out of fear of being caught, or that this was the revenge of the ghost girl. How do you feel about today's case? Leave a comment so we can discuss. And if you liked it, don't hesitate to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.